Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laghu Parashar, Deputy Project Head of Smart SOT Project in GIZ India. And on behalf of the entire team of GIZ and SEPT, I welcome all of you in this 8th Mobilogue, which is Mobility Dialogue. And this is as a part of National Capacity Building Program organized by Mahua and jointly supported by GIZ and CRDF SEPT University. So today's Get Mobilogue focuses on role of open mobility data in urban mobility. So as a part of today's Mobilogue, we will explore various components involved in developing an open data ecosystem, which will focus on open data application and use cases in urban mobility, and in particular in terms of improving the efficiencies of the system and how data can be used in the user-centric planning. It will also focus on the current ecosystem and what are the data ecosystem has been created across the globe. So we have today's speaker from various other part of the world. And today we have Mr. Kunal Kumar, Joint Secretary and Mission Director, Smart City Mission, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, to deliver the keynote speaker. We also joined by esteemed speakers, Mr. Rikesh Shah from the Transport from London, Ms. Tatiana from World Bank, and Mr. Pravesh Vyani, Associate Professor from IIT Delhi. So before we proceed, I think my colleagues have some couple of polls to start with. Right? Can you display that?
Yeah. So we have just two questions to start with before we hand it over to Kunal sir for his keynote remarks. Noshin, can you put it up? Yeah, so the very first question is a very basic one, whether you are aware about the open data portals that are already there in India. So you'll have approximately a minute time, Noshin, if I'm correct, to respond to this, and then
5-10 seconds.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to our next question. Okay, we are already receiving some responses, and as I can see, the majority of the participants, around 55%, are saying that they are not aware of the open data portals in India, and I think 45% people are aware of these portals. So I think it makes a good starting point and sets the context very well of the webinar today. So we will be talking about the data portals that are currently there from Government of India. Even Smart Cities Mission has their own open data portal. Can we have the second question, please? Yeah, so the second question is again whether you've ever used these open data portals to access the transport related data sets. So even the Smart City Mission's open data portal and Government of India's data.gov.in has data related to transport from city data officers from all the cities. They are uploading data sets on these portals. So please select yes if you have accessed these data sets, you've used these data sets, and if not, of course you can select no. Can we have results? Okay, so again 76% of participants say that they have never used or accessed transport related data sets. So you can already see that most of the participants are not even aware of the data portal is available, and when it comes to urban mobility data, most of them are have not ever accessed these data sets. So I think Laghu, this sets the context very well for this webinar. And with this, probably I would like to invite you to
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ren. Before I ask Sri Kunal Kumar for delivering the keynote presentation and address, just a brief introduction. Sri Kunal Kumar is from Indian Administrative Services, presently holding the position of Joint Secretary and Mission Director, Smart City Mission, at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, since 2018. Earlier, he was Municipal Commissioner at Pune Municipal Corporation, Maharashtra, for close to 4 years. He has been working in the state of Maharashtra since 1999 and has served across various cities in Maharashtra state. Shri Kunal Kumar has worked as a district collector in 3 districts of Bhandara, Jalgaon, and Aurangabad, and has also worked as a municipal commissioner in Kolhapur Municipal Corporation. He is an electrical engineer, graduate from IIT Roorkee, has successfully completed his master in public management from National University of Singapore, jointly conducted with Harvard Kennedy School of Cambridge, USA. Shri Kumar was awarded by the Prime Minister of India for excellence in Aadhaar governance award during his stint as district collector of Aurangabad. Besides traveling, he is an avid interest in reading, follow sports across the world, and avid cyclist. I would also say not only for the recreational but as a commuting also he used the cycle. So yeah, with this introduction, I'll welcome Mr. Kunal Kumar and please request him for his keynote speech. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Laghu. It almost seems to me I'm here for a job interview. My entire CV was written. I'm very, very happy with my job and I don't want to change. So thank you for that introduction.
Thank you.
So we are talking about open data in mobility. And I have a few slides. How much time do I have, Laghu?
Sir, 15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay. So let's go to the second slide. Right. A very sort of very loaded slide to begin with, but if I decouple what is there on the slide into components, we realize the three kinds of investments important in cities and in the system as a whole to make digital data and technology initiatives to succeed. So one of those nodes of the triangle of investments is people. How do you enable strengthening of human resources, training of human resources, capacitating of human resources, getting the right talent to make things possible? The second investment is in processes. You know, we have to bring so many processes. We have to build processes around policies, around different kind of SOPs, protocols, and those are very important across the sector to be built. Standards, for example, and then platforms where you can have sharing, where you can have collaboration, where you can have visualization and research on various things that are happening in the ecosystem. One of them is, of course, the data portals that we're talking about. And all our missions, all our technology initiatives essentially embody this 3P principle. So we talk about the same when we talk about cities as data smart cities. And even though the topic for today's discussion is open data for mobility, essentially, you know, to do anything with data and to be able to make impact with data, to be able to use data for as a leader, as a change maker in the city, to impact, let's say, climate, to impact ease of living, to impact business environment, we need to understand how to govern the systems of data, how to build data alliances, how to create processes within the city. So most of our work is around what we may call the primary education in the field of data. That's very essential. Otherwise, you will not go ahead and do the bigger things that you can do in the world of data. Then the National Urban Digital Mission is one key component of our work. We'll be working with even smaller cities to build that capacity of not only providing online services, but also handling data. The Urban Data Exchange is a cutting edge example of something that we are doing at the national level. And this is like the UPI of data. UPI, you can transfer money from one mobile to another. Similarly, if you want to safely and securely transfer data from multiple constituents to work on a single problem solving, of a problem, you could use IUDX, and we have credible examples of where IUDX is getting to support such solutioning, and so on. So this slide covers most of the things that we have, initiated over the last 3 to 4 years in the Smart Cities mission, and everything which is here has a big role to play in this entire field of how do we look at creating impact from data, creating impact and leveraging digital technologies to bring impact to the lives of people. Go next. And as I said, the National Urban Digital Mission is focused again on the people process platform approach. This is now across all the 4,000 cities. So even though the smart cities mission focuses on 100 cities, we have the mandate of taking the learnings that we've got from the 100 smart cities and empowering the system, empowering citizens and cities to be able to offer high quality services to the people through responsive and participatory governance methodologies. So this is a program which has taken off as an offshoot from the smart cities mission, and by 2026 we expect every city in the country to be on using data meaningfully and being able to offer online services to their people. Next. And so the overarching strategy is the data smart city strategy. There is no space between data and smart. Somehow in this slide there is space. So essentially, this is the guiding document. We have come out with the second iteration of this document. We first came out with this in 2019, and a whole lot of capacity building. And for example, just a simple statistic that in 2018, 2 of our cities had city data officers, and today all the 100 have it. So over 3 years, we have moved from 2 to 100. And this is not only about having data officers, about having data offices and partners. So champions, data connectors have been identified in various departments and cities. We work with Tata Trust to create a wholesome training module over 3 months, so 12-week modules for each of these data officers and their teams. It was fairly rigorous. The first time we got 40% guys who could complete it. Second and third iterations have also happened. We also training the larger ecosystem. Then, data governance mechanisms through data policies, alliances, how to work on involving people, creating partnerships. That is being formulated and that is being actioned. And of course, a lot of hackathons and businesses of getting the crowdsourcing business to happen so that people can start to make sense of the data, which is where the platforms come into business. The Smart Cities Open Data Platform, even through the IUDX, the Urban Data Exchange, we've had multiple challenges. But yes, and I'm not surprised with the answers that came out of the poll. Somehow, I think we need a next level of thinking to make these platforms more impactful, because I almost see the need of a very a broker in between, because I have the data, I want to put out data, somebody wants to consume it, but I don't know what the consumer wants as specific data to be consumed, and the consumer has no way to reach me because it's a very amorphous and distributed field, and I don't have any idea, but I just put out what I feel is important, which I hope that the ecosystem will consume. So that is a mechanism which is missing, and I think open data across the world has failed. Even urban data exchanges across the world. The classical case of Copenhagen, which you read, is a 16-page document. It's available on the net, where they started with a concept of, and they went through Hitachi. They had a tender. They got a private company to host that urban data exchange. Never worked because the constituents of the ecosystem did not really find coherence with what they wanted on the system. So those are things which are future evolution, and I think the future lies not in the platform, in the people, which is where we are investing in actually creating alliances and partnerships. For example, if I want to really solve the problems of slums, maybe it is problem related to health or education in slums or sanitation in slums, I would first map out all the relevant stakeholders. I'll start to engage with them, find out what they want, and then put the right data outside. And then not only put my data outside, but also get all other partners who have to solve that problem, who can be meaningfully helpful in solving the problem and putting that data together. For example, solving the problem of crime. And all police forces in our cities have the typical problem that they have less human resources. So if a city wants 2,300 constables, it has it has 1,000 constables. It's shot by 1,300 constables. You always have to deploy them at places where you can make, you want impactful deployment so you can control crime with the limited resources you have. You can predict crime. You can do all that stuff. We have all the tools, but we have all the data lying in our records, archival data, real-time data, camera data, all that can make this possible. But it's getting those people on the on the table, getting them to make alliances, which is where we are trying to work on. That's why I call it the culture of data. It's not only about platforms. Open data and data exchanges don't succeed unless people come together. Next. So Now this is a classical example. We felt that we actually landed on this with a very interesting example. We were discussing the case of accident happening in a city, which is related to mobility in many senses. How do you get quickest possible help to the victims? So we thought, the local police, all hospitals in that area, maybe fire stations, maybe first responders as far as heart and CPR technique go. How do we relate and how do we get all of them into one platform to be able to react quickly instead of everyone needed to be dialed on a phone or something to get access to, which takes so much time. And the golden hour for an accident victim is important. We started looking back, and then we landed on this idea of the urban data exchange. It's sort of a library where all these participants can actually share data in secure, because you don't want sometimes police and fire stations and firemen and some of these people will never want their data to be shared in the open domain because of some reasons, but they need a secure platform to be able to share data. And we've seen a lot of tourism applications in Varanasi, or maybe mobility applications in Surat, and many other cities have now started to experiment with the platform. We would, by the end of March 2023, which is 1 year from now, we would have deployed 30 different use cases in the country. That's our target on the data exchange. And by the way, as we speak, because the power of the data exchange goes beyond the urban sector, we just have landed on a use case with a couple of startups where, for very small and marginal farmers who need credit, but because they don't have any credit history, they don't have any records, they are not able to access the market. We are creating sort of an aggregators platform here to various people to come and make sense and find out who should be eligible for a loan and now or not eligible for a loan. And that is being possible because this is such a powerful platform. It has cross-sectoral implications. So agriculture and health are already starting to look at this, and MeitY is starting to look at this as a prospective national data exchange platform. So next. So I'll go quickly, maybe So on open data, we have about 5,000 resources on open data. This is the Smart Cities open data portal. And we didn't want to create something new. So this is part of the data.gov itself. It's a microsite within the data.gov portal. And we've had so far in the last 1 year that we put this on about 1 lakh downloads and about 5 lakh views. I think this is just the beginning, and the kind of country and the kind of potential this has. It also has APIs, and some of them are transport APIs, or real-time data is also being shared on this. I would like, if GIZ and you guys can come together and give us a meaningful, proposal that, look, we would like this kind of data to be seen on the platform. It will be wonderful for people like me to make that possible. So we want more dialogue with consumers of data. We want more dialogue with people who can use this data. And then we would be very happy to put that in data on the public domain. Go next. So, the problems, multiple entities, data silos. We have, Mr. Shah from Transport for London, and Mr. Pravesh, who is also incidentally wanting to work with me closely. Somehow I have not been able to engage with him deeply, but I know he has fantastic solutions and stuff which can bring together these entities. Ad hoc demand-driven decision making. I said demand-driven. It's not data-driven. It's demand-driven. So I want a flyover. I want a metro. But that kind of thing. The non-existent forecasting models. You don't know what's going to happen, and therefore you cover for everything, and you're trying to do anything which is shooting in the dark. Non-adaptation of standards. One of the things that we have to do is data standards. Yes, we have global standards, but we have to clearly, recognize whether these are the standards we're going to adopt, or we are creating our own standards. And customer and provider interfaces are not conducive to virtuous cycle of improvement, because we don't really learn from those interfaces that much. Well, so commuters, transit operators, government authorities, clear beneficiaries of this entire business, and in the long term, the cities benefit, economies benefit. Go next. I'll just push forward because I'm short on time. So these are the different use cases which are possible. This is just a tip of the iceberg. Many things are possible. Urban and transit planning. This is something which is done in a very archaic way in our cities. And while technology has leaped many folds, we've not actually jumped those ladders as far as using those technologies to plan transit and urban planning operations. Then passenger crowd index for a lot of things. In fact, this could be a great way of earning money for the city as well. Mobility data portals, mobility as a service, charging as a service, and so on and so forth. So a lot can be made possible if we have this field of sharing of data becoming evolving into a in a better and more structured way. Go ahead. So this one is what I was talking about. I just want to give some examples of what is becoming possible. So we've onboarded on the Surat multimodal transport application two different kinds of data sets right now, which is the bus transit data set and the e-bike data set. And within the bus transit data set also, we've got data sets from multiple different agencies. So it is bus transit, but coming from different agencies. E-bike, of course, coming from the e-bike operator. And it gives you source and destination as inputs, suggests routes, gives you end-to-end solutions for planning your trips and so on. We have yet not integrated fare payments and all, but this is probably that beginning sort of the rudimentary start, or maybe the 20% of the mobility as a service thing that you keep talking about. Go next. So the Citylink app, this is available on the Google Play Store. It also gives you services like if you're standing on a bus stop, number one, tell you when the bus is going to come. Plus, also it tells you whether seats are vacant on the bus. Especially post-COVID, this was one thing that was appreciated a lot by people because they wanted to be on buses with more space and stuff. Again, tip of the iceberg. This is just what is just small representation of the big things that are possible because of sharing of data. Go next. Then, of course, I think probably the next steps in the Surat is to actually facilitate payment, integrate other data sets with this so that we make it more meaningful for people, and to popularize the app. So we are trying to see how we can work with the mayor and the municipal commissioner to create a larger audience for the app. And it also has business impact. Clearly, we see revenues go up for the operator, more benefits for the citizens, as well as it opens up more revenue streams like advertisements and stuff. So those are the avenues we are trying to tap, and this is a project in as we speak. It's being tried out in the field. Go next. And this is another interesting solution which came up during the Smart Move Challenge. It's a dynamic web dashboard. So this allows you to essentially, which is something that Mr. Pravesh talks about of transport management. This was one example of a solution which came up. I'm sure he's going to present his solution that he has already created an open source software of how do you match demand and supply for public bus services. So these are things that are possible. And I would narrate a story which is basically something that I probably should not be talking about because kind of illegal about what we did. So in Pune, when I was municipal commissioner, we actually got some data from mobile companies, and that was anonymized mobile data. So at least we are not peeping into people's lives. But yeah, it was accessed in an illegal way by threatening them that we will not give you right of way permissions if you don't give us this data. And we analyzed data of 15 days of close to 1.7 million mobile records. And we saw all our buses moved exactly opposite to where people were moving. At 2 p.m., people are moving from X to Y, my buses are moving from Y to X. And those are the kinds of things which you can clearly see on a screen, the power of data. And I then visited this company in London when I was there called Citylink, Citylogic, right? Citylogic. And Citylogic actually demonstrated the platform they used to plan for transportation operations within London Olympics. And they were exactly using the same principles. They knew where the origins were taking place, where destinations were, where crowding was happening, where people were at what point of time, what kind of transport solutions were needed, what are the alternatives that can be planned for, what are the investments in infrastructure and policy that are needed. Everything came out from that simple data point. So I think one of the smartest ways to probably solve the problems of transit and demand supply assessment in our cities is going to be use of anonymized mobile data, which is, I think, at the moment, at least within the framework of law. And if Citylogic could do it with GDPR in London, I think we at least at the moment have a relatively simpler structure to adhere to here in India. Go next. So I think way forward. Very overarching ideas. Every one of these requires a lot of effort, and we as a group of people who are interested in promoting these need to come together and see how we can. In fact, GIZ, I should really appreciate and thank for the kind of work that you've done on mobility as a service, the kind of documents you've created on PPP and bus operations and others. That is the work that is required by the entire ecosystem. All of us have to contribute to create, an environment where policies, regulations, agreements, everything can be created. We have a bouquet. It's like uh, 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 to be able to succeed in this field, you have to go into a buffet with multiple dishes on offer. And one of the dishes called policy, the other is a regulation agreement. You have, unified mobility standards, data standards, then processes to host these data standard, to host the data, and how do you broker between the consumers and producers of data? How do you actually share APIs, which are most high valued APIs that should be shared? Can we have something which helps us develop these APIs faster? Can we have agile development methodologies? And also to build capacity in the entire ecosystem to be able to manage this data, to bring out quality data. And it's not about only bringing out data, but also about engaging with the ecosystem continuously to be able to iterate what data to bring out also. So a lot of work needs to be done, and I don't know where we are at the moment in this entire evolution. Um, we have all the ingredients, I think, but lying in different places. Somehow, all of them needs to come together to accelerate this business of using data for mobility. I would welcome anyone on this call who wants to work with us in the mission or with our cities anyway to take these ideas forward. We'll be very happy to work with you and set up some partnerships to see how we can take these things further. Maybe I'll stop here. Lagu, thank you so much. And,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. I think setting up the context, one level of, I think, basic infrastructure already been set up by under the smart cities mission with the cities command and control center kind of data which we are getting. Of course, a lot of work is required as far as capacity building is concerned at a city level, and the data. This concept of data officer is very interesting actually. It's been very interesting concept has been thought of by the smart city mission. Yeah, so thanks a lot, I think, for setting up the context. Now I request my colleague Narendra to take over the moderation and please introduce the speakers. Thank you, Narendra.
Thanks, Lagu, and thank you, Kunal sir. It's always very good to hear how passionately you talk about the subject, and I hope we'll be able to gather some of the ideas that you've already given, and we'll try to work something out towards data-driven solutions. With this, let's move to the panel discussion session. So just a brief introduction. Today we have four panelists. We have Dr. Neeta Verma, who is again DG, Director General of National Informatics Center, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. We have Mr. Rikesh Shah. He heads the commercial innovation at TfL London. We have Ms. Tatiana Peralta. She's a senior transfer specialist at World Bank. And then we have Mr. Pravesh Biyani, and he's associate professor at Triple IT Delhi. Unfortunately, Dr. Neeta Verma is not being able to join today virtually, but she has recorded a message and sent us. So we'll start with a video message, and then we'll move to TfL's case study. So I'll request my colleague to kind of share the screen and share the video message, and then we'll go into the live panel discussion. Nausheen, if you can share the screen, let me know.
Yeah, it will just take a fraction of seconds.
Cities are at the center of economic growth. They provide better medical facilities, better employment opportunities, better education facilities. And therefore, we often see migration of people from rural to urban areas. As
Narendra, are you able
population
to
increases,
hear?
these cities face a lot of challenge
Yes, yes,
in
it's
terms of
audible.
resources,
It's
be it
audible?
power, water, or clean air. City administrations world over are constantly striving to find solutions and address these challenges. Mobility in urban areas is another big concern. As population increases, we see traffic jams on the road. People spend a lot of time in traveling, spend time, money in terms of fuel. It causes a lot of stress. Also, it increases pollution in the city. Safety of citizens is another concern because during accident response time of emergency services is sometimes not as desired. To address this growing demand, we need to create new spaces, new infrastructure. But at the same time, we also need to focus on proper management of our existing infrastructure, our public transportation systems, our other utility services. And today, technology provides us a hope to better manage our resources, to optimally use our resources. And to do this kind of a technology driven management, we need to make our cities ready with the basic infrastructure in terms of sensors, in terms of cameras, as well as connectivity on the ground. Government of India, through its flagship programs of Smart Cities and Amrit, is actually focusing on creating more and more urban areas and also making them smart so that they can effectively manage their resources and provide a better quality of living to their residents. Once we have in these kind of sensors in place, cameras, as well as connectivity, we start getting data on the ground. Now, to process this data, we need to have robust cloud infrastructure as well as big data processing capability so that we could take decisions in real time and communicate back to these transportation systems on the ground. Thus, data is going to play a very vital role in urban mobility. Another challenge is, unlike many other systems where you can define models and you can have algorithms and then kind of make them operate and they can operate for certain period of time successfully. Here, because the situation on the ground in terms of traffic patterns is not only changing every day, it is actually changing every hour. You have peak hours, you have lean hours, and then you also have temporal surge in terms of some processions or some kind of festivals in the city. You may also have things like and then there are also this pattern of weekdays and weekends and so on and so forth. So we really need to build models driven by AI and machine learning to respond to these dynamically changing scenarios in a real time basis. This kind of a systems once put in place can really help public infrastructure allocation, public transportation allocation, scheduling as well as service delivery, management of traffic by adjusting signal times, responding to road accidents will really help citizens in saving their time, money, and provide safe and pollution free living. As far as Government of India is concerned regarding data, as you know, government has an open data policy under which NIC has been mandated to put up a data portal. We had put up data portal data.gov.in, which has hundreds of thousands of data sets available in open, being downloaded by many people in India and abroad. And transport sector has also contributed significantly in this. We also have done a lot of automation as far as or digital transformation as far as transport sector is concerned. We have a national platform Vahan, which is for the vehicle registration, which caters to registration of vehicles and all vehicle related services across the country. We have Sarthi, which is for similarly for driving license, and national platform catering to all services, right from learning license to driving license, its renewal and other permits from time to time on a national level platform. This two put together has actually evolved into a national transport register, which is then catering to various other services which have over the time have actually evolved around this platform of transport register. Like we have all the pollution control centers across the country are making use of this to to and with the help of IoT devices actually to a common platform giving these PUCC certificates. We are also building under the guidance of ministry integrated road accident database, which is this project is in its initial stages and being rolled out in states across the country. And once we'll have this, we'll have this will surely help in or contribute in early response to the accident victims and will overall enhance the road safety. In some of the states, beginning from Uttarakhand, we are also doing system called vehicle location tracking system, where the public transport in Uttarakhand is equipped with these kind of IoT devices, and then they have a control room which is constantly monitoring these buses, not only providing various kinds of services, but also coming to their rescue in case of any distress or any kind of unfortunate accident or any other failure happens while the transport is on the road. And this is helping and encouraged by Uttarakhand model. Many other states have started implementing this system. Now when we have, so as you could see, we already have IT systems, and then we have a lot of these traffic cameras nowadays, CCTV cameras placed on the roads, which is also in a real time generating a lot of data from time and applying by AI and other technologies. Lot of information can be culled from this data and can be shared with other stakeholders who can then respond through various AI/ML models to do a better traffic management onto this. But while we share this data, while technologically as NIC we have built our ecosystem in terms of data exchange, API exchange to facilitate these kind of exchange of data among various stakeholders. But it also needs to be really be put into a kind of a framework where you have proper contracts between the organizations who are sharing and the organizations who are consuming. You also need to take care of privacy of data through various algorithms of anonymization, aggregation, and making sure that that interest of all stakeholders and most importantly citizens is properly protected. Exchange of this data in a safe manner once it is in. So essentially, if you could have a framework in which we could put all those things and then kind of roll out, it will be of huge, immense value. Cloud infrastructure also in country, we are quite ready. We have government cloud. We also have a lot of cloud service providers in the country who are operating. So cloud wise, big data wise, also readiness is good. Connectivity is another critical component in this whole urban mobility solution because you need to gather the information from the ground in real time, process it maybe partially at the edge and then on the cloud, and then send the decisions back for appropriate measurements, whether it is adjusting signal timings or any other action which has to happen on the ground. And therefore, we really need robust, reliable, high speed connectivity to make this happen on the ground. And as you have seen in a Digital India program, lot of initiatives have been taken by government and the same time by industry, and we have really seen the broadband penetration and internet access and high speed connectivity across the country. And with the recent announcement of the honorable prime minister where fiber is going to reach to all 600,000 villages, we going to see much better connectivity as we go forward. So in nutshell, if you see, as a country, we are quite ready, be it data, be it infrastructure, be it know-how, or be it connectivity. We are good to start, and as we go, we cannot keep improving these things. And I think and therefore I feel this event on urban mobility is very timely. I like to compliment the organizers and also thank them for inviting me to this event, and I wish this event a great success. Thank you.
Anoshin, is it done?
Yes.
Okay. Again, let me just thank Mr. Dr. Neeta Verma. She has been instrumental in implementing these digital initiatives across country at NIC. And after this message, probably we'll move to our live panel discussion. Let me invite now Mr. Rikesh Shah. Rikesh heads the commercial innovation at TfL London, and he leads the initiatives related to open data and digital partnerships at TfL. He has also been responsible for managing all the commercial and communications activity that's supporting the digital transformation strategy at TfL. And as a part of his work, he's also coordinating with leading tech companies, travel application providers, and developers who are working or who are using TfL's open data. And Rikesh will present TfL's approach towards open data ecosystem in terms of infrastructure policies and economic benefits. So Rikesh, over to you, and welcome to the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Narendra, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's lovely to be here. What I'll do, I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, it's visible perfectly.
Excellent, thank you. Yep, so as Narendra says, I'm Rikesh Shah. I'm the head of commercial innovation at Transport for London. I also sit on the Mayor of London's Smart London board. And I've been at Transport for London now for 20 plus years. And I've been working on the Smart London board for about 6 years. And the focus there is how do you make London the smartest city in the world. In terms of today, I'll give you a brief overview of Transport for London. I'll talk about our open data journey, but I'll also talk about what we're thinking about beyond open data and how do we start driving a culture of open innovation in our city, where through the use of data, you can develop fantastic products that helps you run your city more effectively, more efficiently, and better for its citizens. So on the next slide, what we have here is an overview of Transport for London. Our role is quite varied depending on what we're doing. So in some aspects, we're an operator. So for those of you that have been to London, we operate the tube service end to end, and we have 15,000 staff doing that, responsible for 5 million journeys every day. We're also a procurer. So you see the buses there. We have 10,000 buses in London, 7 million journeys every day. We procure those services through contracts. And we do the same for the Docklands Light Railway, London Overground, and some of the other services that you see there. We're also a regulator. We regulate things like the taxi and public hire trade, so any mini cabs or taxis that you see in London. We're also a significant influencer. So we have influencing power around road safety, around air quality, because of the role that transport plays when it comes to emissions, and also things such as encouraging more people to be active. And finally, we're also a large commercial entity where we sell things. So we have the largest out-of-home media contract in Europe for the ads that you see on our public transport network. We're also one of the largest landowners in London, so we have a large property portfolio. And what you see on the screen here is just an example or a snapshot of some of the things that we operate. But most fundamentally, as part of this conversation, is the incredible amount of data points that we have in our city. And how do you start thinking about these assets as data assets too is really important. So this is an important number for us. 80% of trips in London there's a target which will be made by walking, cycling and public transit by 2041. So our mayor has set a very clear goal that he wants more people to be using sustainable forms of transport as we look into the years ahead. Currently, we're at about 63%, but it's fantastic to have a strategic Northern Star to aim for, or a North Star to aim for, as we focus on our investments and some of the behaviours that we want London to carry out. The strategy itself is underpinned by three main pillars. One is around encouraging a healthier London. The second one is around ensuring you're a good alternative to the private car. So making sure that the public transport alternatives and the active travel alternatives are good. And I'll talk about that in more detail. And finally, making sure that transport plays a key role when it comes to creating jobs and economic growth in our city. So it's very important for us to have that context before we start investing in various infrastructure projects. What's really important, I'm consciously touching on this, is whatever we do, the customer has to be at the heart of what we do. The citizen is critical in this conversation. So when we ask our citizens, Londoners, what do you want? Those millions of Londoners are saying, I want every journey to matter, every journey matters. So if I'm going from my house to school, I'm going to my house to the place of worship or work, I want to make sure that I get there reliably, I get there on timely and securely and safely. That's fundamental. The second point is they want value for money. If I'm making that trip from A to B, I need to make sure that I get value for money. And finally, again, related to this debate, Londoners want us to be progressive and they want us to be innovative. So they're demanding that as part of the core offering that we provide, they want innovation to be in there. And data and open data is a core part of that. And if you get that right, you build trust with your citizens, who are, again, we emphasize, are critical to this debate. In terms of innovation, Mr. Kumar touched on culture. Culture is critical. You know, we work in an organization that's innovative. The predecessor organization be innovative. You know, the first metro service in the world in 1863 was built near the Piccadilly Metropolitan line near Paddington Station. And also on the right-hand side, you see one of the first traffic lights ever invented in the world, where you had the same problems then that you have now: congestion, road safety risk, and lots of other things. So how do you ensure that you're challenging the status quo to make sure that you progress and achieve your city outcomes? So what do we mean by open data? We've been running the open data program now for 10, 15 years. And, you know, we started with, we'll make the data available unless there's a commercial, legal, reputational, or technical reason why we shouldn't. And we worked on the principles that all the data will be free. It'll be a level playing field. So it's not just the big players that have a really impressive infrastructure that can access it. This will be open to anyone. It's got to be simple to access. And also, as part of the engagement that Mr. Kumar talked about, what formats do you want to provide it in? There's no point providing it in this really complicated TFL structured format that no one can use. So it's really important to set those principles right at the beginning. Why do we do it? And this is a really important question. You know, firstly, we are responsible for our citizens. So it's really important that the data that we have, we make it available and we're transparent as part of that agenda. And it also builds the trust that I talked about earlier with our citizens and other key stakeholders. It's of course about reach. If we're providing lots of public transport and other relevant types of data available, how do we engage with the customer through their channels?
Mr. Rakesh, can you please do it full screen?
Yeah, of course, sorry.
Thank you.
Yep, sorry. So how do we engage with the customer through their channel of choice? And I'll come on to that in a minute. Also, Transport for London or the City Authority cannot produce a product for every single scenario, but the innovation community can. So how do you start developing niche products that people might want to know about when it comes to transport? I'll come on to the economic benefit, but also by using and building on the innovators that we have at Transport for London, how do you create this community that can problem solve in a much more creative way, coming up with innovative new solutions? So the types of data that we released, you know, it's the typical public transport data that you'd imagine, you know, real-time bus information, where the metro service is, where the cycle hire service is, journey planning, road safety, air quality, cycle lanes. But there was two main catalysts when we started to release this data, because we had lots of challenges at the beginning. The first one is the Olympic Games, where we wanted to make sure that people had as much information as possible about their service before they made a journey. So we made lots of information available. And the second one is we created a new website. So when we created that new website in 2014, APIs and cloud computing was still relatively new, particularly in the public sector. But what we did is we plugged in all of our website with the relevant information through APIs. And what that meant is, as a byproduct, and it was a byproduct at the time, we created new data fields that we could release APIs to the market, and they could create products. And what was happening around that same time is people were scraping data from our website and getting it wrong. And when they were getting it wrong and they were making new apps, what happened was my team was getting the complaints to say the information you're providing is incorrect. So we spent a lot of time correcting and writing back to customers why our data is not wrong. So as a result, we said, why don't we release our data? And I'll talk about some of the benefits that were realized. So around about 3 years ago now, we had over 16,000 developers using our data. So there's a whole community of developers using our data. Over 700 products, actually, it was not 600, over 700 products were produced on mobile devices. And of the 9 million Londoners, 42% were using an app powered by TfL data. So you can see the scalable difference you can have to achieve your city outcomes through releasing the data. Here's some financial benefits I talked about. I spoke about the economic benefits. We commissioned some independent work in 2017. And the value of releasing our open data to London is £130 million per annum. That's through time saved, that's through us getting data back through partnerships, that's through the innovation, and that's also through the jobs that are being created. So you can see that this isn't a small niche project. It can be core to a city outcome in many aspects, and the value itself is incredible. In terms of releasing the data, it's really important to keep it simple. So what we did was we say, you register. We will then give you access to tokens. If you're throttling it and you're using it too much, we will talk to you and understand why it's happening. And finally, if you create new products, say it's powered by TfL, but please don't pretend to be TfL, because it's not an official product endorsed by us. So it's really important to keep that simple to ensure that we get the right level of engagement from developers. And what I'll do, I'll give you some examples. So we split our audience into 4 main categories. The first one was the transport apps, the city mappers, the bus checkers, the tubeway, and many other apps that were out there. And they had a significant market share in London, so we wanted to make sure we engage with them. And the most important takeaway for today is be absolutely clear on the problem that you're trying to solve before you design the data. No point designing the data, releasing it, and then saying solve our problems. Be clear on what strategic outcomes you're after and what problems you're trying to solve. And we released our data, and we saw lots of niche products being produced and innovative products being produced, which encouraged more people to use public transport. But beyond that, we started to form strategic partnerships with the likes of Apple, Google, and many others, Twitter. The organizations that our people are using. So our customer is their customer. So how do you provide a good digital experience through channels that customers want to use? So very quickly with Apple, they started to promote our bike sharing scheme. With Twitter, they started to promote a service of always on. So if the service there was a delay or there was a disruption, people were getting tweets in real time so they can replan their journey. With Google, this is fascinating. We'd have large events in London. In real time, we were closing the roads virtually so we can control the traffic. And as a result, irrespective of what was happening on the road network, we were controlling the traffic virtually or through virtual channels. So people were rerouting. And that was really powerful, where we wanted to send people through a different direction to manage our congestion and safety, any safety matters. So really, really impressive things that we did with Google. Also with Google, or what's Waze, is we had a two-way data partnership, two-way data sharing partnership. So Waze were promoting information around incidents on our network. And here's one example where don't get stuck and fill up. We have a tunnel called the Blackwall Tunnel that connects North and South London. It's a major artery in London. But a major reason why we get delays there is people break down because they run out of fuel. So we started to target notifications through Waze to people that were approaching the tunnel. And as a result, we saw people redirecting to the petrol station, to the garage, to refuel. And as a result, it's saved us millions of pounds in congestion avoidance in that tunnel, even if a small percentage of those that rediverted were about to break down. And also, Waze are giving us data back now. So it's not just us sharing data with Waze, they're giving us data about incidents on our network, which is going straight into the control room. So operationally, we can put interventions in place to run our network better in real time. So a really, really impressive partnership between two organizations. And finally, we also talked to consultants, academia, and various others who also want to play with our data and create new products. So there's clearly a tiered approach to the way we're doing this. In terms of some of the considerations, Mr. Kumar touched on this. Engage with this community, talk to them about the problems that you have, talk to them about data that you're releasing. Treat data as a product and be prepared to pivot that product. Run hackathons, run blogs, really get them to test your data. Because what you find in transport is you've got some really passionate data scientists who want to make cities better. So use them, create as a community. Don't be too transactional in that relationship. Secondly, drive that culture internally. There will be some people that will say, why are you releasing the data? Why is Google making lots of money from our data? Get some champions at a board level. And really importantly, don't think of this as a technology project. You know, think of this as how do you make our city better? Is it safety data? Is it cycling data? Why do you want to release the data and what outcomes do you want? Design, iterate, and then scale. And set the right standards so data is interoperable. And then this just gives a visualization of how our open data worked. As I say, it was therefore a responsive website, which was innovative in its time. And we also made sure that we made that same data available to third parties. So there was no preference on everything going into the website first. This was the technology infrastructure. I won't spend too much time on this. And also this gives you an example of a unified API. So here's all the various types of data, and it's a snapshot of the data that was being released. And you can see how complicated it is. I mean, imagine if you're at Ahmedabad train station. You might have a bus stop outside, you might have a taxi rank, you might even have a metro service. How do you start saying all of this is Ahmedabad station in an API? So there's a lot of back-end work that's required to make sure that the data that you release is easy to use for the developer. We did everything on cloud. And again, as I was saying, it's quite early in its day, but with cloud, it really gave us the flexibility that we needed, and it was incredibly secure. And then I think the final point I would touch on very quickly in the next couple of minutes is open data has really set the way for open innovation in London. And what I mean by open innovation is there's a fantastic ecosystem of innovators, whether they're large corporates, academics, startups, investors, accelerators, and many others. There's an ecosystem that wants to solve our problems. So rather than us as an agency or a city defining the solutions, how do we work with this fantastic ecosystem, and many of you on the call here today, to solve our problems and really let them come up with innovative ideas to do things better? And data underpins this. A couple of examples. We've run the London Road Lab. So we've brought a series of innovators in, and they've landed some really large contracts now with us. These are companies that traditionally TfL wouldn't work with, because historically we work with lots of large players. But we worked here with the utilities, and two solutions that we've taken forward. One solution scans social media, and based on scanning social media, an AI algorithm is telling us where the largest incidents or significant incidents are taking place in London. So as a result, we can operationally respond. But they're not only looking at keywords, they're also looking at visual images. And the other one that we've taken forward is Immense, which is modeling roadworks before they actually take place. So as a result, you can model what will be the impact of congestion if I did the roadworks at 5 o'clock tomorrow instead of 7 o'clock. What impact would it be on air quality? What impact is it on safety risk? So it really allows you to control and predict what might happen before it actually does. We've done something similar with Freight Lab, which is how do we reduce the adverse impact of freight, particularly with the pandemic, you're seeing more freight deliveries. How do we bring in new solutions? So one solution here is electrification will happen, but that means the vehicles will be heavier. You stop the emissions from the tailpipe, but what will happen is you will still get wheels that are burning rubber and polluting the air. Well, Enzo's just created some new materials, which is zero pollution. So as a result, we're testing it and seeing what impact it has in London. And similarly, we're looking at other products there. And another data one I'll touch on is this one. So we're partnering with Mercedes-Benz. An average car has over 100 sensors. Rather than installing lots of infrastructure on the road network, how do we partner with OEMs and others to really start understanding what's going on the road? And what we're doing with Mercedes is they're telling us about hotspots and near misses to do with road safety. So before an incident takes place, and sadly in London, we had 90 deaths last year as a result of road collisions. How do we get that to zero? So as a result, we need to better predict and understand near misses so we can put the right investment in place to reduce road risk. And by reducing road risks, resulting in less death and serious injuries on our network. And we're also looking at other vehicle types. So think of vehicle as a sensor rather than lots of fixed infrastructure. And finally, one project, we talk about air quality and some of the adverse impacts. So in London, we wanted to test a hypothesis. If we held traffic back from a less densely populated area from a densely populated area, what impact does it have? So we had a traffic signal that held traffic back. But then when you want to assess the impact, when it comes to air quality, there are so many variables, types of vehicle going through, the weather, the typology, the types of building, the human's height. So we factored all of that in, not just put a random sensor somewhere and said air quality is fine, but we put all of these variables in. And what we found is as a result of this traffic intervention, it significantly reduced the exposure to bad air for people that are coming out of the station. So as a result, we've created a new model now based on this scenario. So what we're doing now is with our 1,200 changes that we make at some similar junctions every year, we'll be factoring this model in. So that means that people that are using public transit coming out of the station at a similar road location will be less exposed to bad air because of this traffic signal change. So really simple change, but really complicated in terms of developing the model. And that's where we need to work in partnership. So that was working in partnership with Bosch, Here Maps, the bus operators, the car manufacturers, and various others. I will pause there. Sorry, that was very quick. Hopefully that was okay, and I'll pass back.
Thank you, Rikesh. I think you've precisely summarized actually the benefits of having data on open data portals. I think we often talk about our cities not having enough technical capacity, and I think by opening data and inviting developers to develop solutions for your cities, I think it's an interesting way to kind of look forward to. I think we'll also have a couple of questions, but I'll hold on to that for now. We'll take it in the end. And now probably we'll move on to our next speaker. So let me just give a brief introduction. So Ms. Tatiana Peralta, she's a senior transport specialist at World Bank. She also holds a master's degree in transport engineering from MIT. Prior to joining the bank, she was working with MIT's Transit Lab, and the area of focus again was transit operations, urban systems, land use, and transit models. She's also working on collection and use of innovative data and technology. She works with different teams to operationalize and pilot the use of digital data and data analytics. Tatiana, welcome again to the session, and Tatiana will be talking about, I think, if I'm not wrong, case of Chennai and what they are doing, World Bank is doing. So, Tatiana, over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to check, you guys can see my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Great. So thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation, and being able to kind of share a little bit of the work that we're doing in Chennai, but more broadly, I kind of put together a presentation that joins a little bit the experience that we've had working with open data in different parts of the world, the role that we see open data going forward, and kind of the importance of open data for cities in kind of a disruptive world of technology as we see. So kind of a couple of key things that I want to touch upon this presentation. First of all, just looking at cities and how they're growing. And I think that what's really important in open data is that open data is really at this intersection of these transformational changes that are going through. So the first you have is, the transformational change that cities are going through, right? They're the driver of growth and opportunity. However, they still have these challenges that limit accessibility and safety and sustainability. On the other hand, you have the second transformation, which is, that urban transport is really at this point of disruption that is powered by digital technology that will alter how cities change, and we need to kind of know how to respond to that. So in this wave of of technology disruption, you have connected, autonomous, shared, and electric vehicles that will change the model to mobility as a service. And I want to tie this towards the end a little bit on how open data sets the foundation for these changes. And I think that's something that's really important is that, through these revolutions, the technology revolution, the cities increase, the increase of cities, the focus of transport has to remain the same, right? It's to deliver accessible, affordable, safe, and sustainable mobility. And that's something really important for us, that when we talk about data, we think about it as a tool to deliver affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport, not the other way around. So what does this mean for today? This means that leveraging the data and technology revolution for delivering better planning, delivery of services, and citizen responsiveness. And to do so will require establishing governance and digital systems. But for tomorrow, and kind of something that I'll touch upon a bit, is that these city systems and these open data fundamentals that you end up establishing today are really the building blocks for the future. So starting off, the challenge and the opportunity of urban mobility in Indian cities. Cities are really the growth, are one of the engines of growth behind the economic growth. They provide 60 to 65% of India's GDP, as well as 45 to 50% of its consumption. By 2030, we expect that India's urban population is expected to grow to 600 million. So essentially, it's well established that that cities are growing, will continue to grow, and that the challenges of delivering efficient transportation will only continue to exacerbate as these cities grow. So what are the challenges? And I think it's, as I said, when we talk about technology, we always try to bring it back to what are the transportation challenges? Because technology and open data is very exciting, but at the end of the day, it is only as useful as you are able to funnel it to solve these key challenges. So first of all, congestion. High congestion causes losses of over $22 billion in the top 4 metros in India. There is still a scarcity of public transportation. Bus provision is about 1/3 to 1/5 of an estimated need in Indian cities. All of these things causes pollution. There's an estimate that pollution causes more than $2 million of premature deaths, which is a big portion of losses, an estimated losses for India's GDP, and then road safety, which translates into thousands of deaths every single year. So on one hand, we have this challenge, which is the transportation and the increasing city challenge. On the other hand, you have what's happening in technology. And I think this is what is really exciting, which is we're at that point of disruptive change in the system, right? The last time we saw a disruptive change equal to what we're seeing right now was essentially in the 1900s with the invention of the automobile. And what's really important about studying the fundamentals and the building blocks today is that this, and I like this image because these two images were taking 13 years apart, right? And on the left, you can see there's only one car on the roads. 13 years later, every single car is on the road. And this was a fundamental shift in how mobility was delivered, and technology is going to cause, that level of a fundamental shift. However, this time it's going to happen even quicker. So how are we thinking about building those building blocks today so that we can deliver mobility systems, efficient mobility systems for the future? So let's think about today. And what are the uses and why should we focus on open data and data today? The first one, improved planning, right? We use data as a fundamental part of kind of understanding how is the network operating, how is the network going to be planned, how can you deliver efficient services. The second one, once you move into more real-time data, improving operations on a real-time basis using this kind of data. And third of all, citizen engagement. And I think we see every single part of this as fundamental for open data, because when we talk about open data, we don't only mean opening up to the public, but actually opening up to institutions and sharing between institutions so that you're actually able to understand what is happening. How does the bus affect rail? How does water and floods affect the resilience of the system? So creating open data platforms really facilitates all these connections. So as I said, we're focused a lot of our work on principles. What are the principles and what are the fundamental blocks that you need in order to deliver the strategic vision of data? And at this core, we have this kind of virtuous cycle of data, that once you've used data for planning, this data should connect back to your operations and to your monitoring and evaluation framework. But kind of tying back to what both of our speakers have touched upon, so I won't touch upon it too much, is that it's not only about this data, it's about how you deliver the data. What are the standards that you're using? What is the data governance framework? What are the partnerships that you are leveraging to deliver this data? And kind of these fundamentals are the ones that can actually deliver value from your data, the data itself. So how we see data, we really see data as infrastructure, and particularly when we're talking about spatial or mobility data, it is really essentially treated as a piece of infrastructure that has to be managed, governed, and essentially used as well. So this means that when we talk about data, we're really not just talking about data. The first part we're talking about is institutional arrangements. What is the capacity to develop and sustain a policy and regulatory systems governing data? Second, people. Who are the people? Do we have the capacity needed to not only create this data but clean it up, put it in the right standards, in the right capacity, in the right formats? Third, the actual data itself. Once you have the institutional arrangements and the people, think about data availability, the quality, and then finally systems. How are you storing the data? How are you sharing the data? How are you putting it on? Are you making sure that it is user friendly? So when we think about data, we really think about every single one of these elements. So going a little bit into the kind of the work that we've done in Chennai, I wanted to share a little bit of kind of the tools. So first of all, how do we come up with these, focusing on the outcomes? How do we create a framework for data? How do we identify the data needs? And then finally, how do we create tools for planning and operations that actually utilize this data for better service delivery? So what we did was essentially we started by what are the outcomes? What are you trying to achieve with your mobility system? So, it was about accessibility and affordability, about citizen experience, about the efficiency and system performance, about resilience, about being sustainable, about safe, and about how do you incentivize innovation. So once we have these mobility objectives, we actually started now looking at the data itself. And using every single one of these outcomes and pillars, what we're able to do is then actually map out what is the specific KPI I'm going to utilize to track my performance on these outcomes. And then second, what are the fundamental data sets that I need in order to then be able to actually quantify these KPIs. The great thing about this is that once you've actually started to collect data, aggregate the data, and actually put it into a single system, you're actually able to then start creating insights about your city that go beyond the data itself. And the beauty of all this is all the work that we do, most of the work in terms of analytics, we use it, we actually create open tools out of it. So for example, what you're seeing here is one of the key indicators that we utilize, which is accessibility. And we define accessibility as the percentage of jobs that can be reached within 60 minutes using public transportation. The beauty of it is we use open standards in order to create all of these tools. And therefore, once you have the data coming in a standardized and formatted way, we can actually create these KPIs on a daily or hourly basis, and understanding how is this data changing based on how operations are changing, based on how the spatial demographics of a city are changing, and actually help us track how is the city doing in terms of these outcomes. So for example, we have our analytics on accessibility, the percentage of jobs that can be reached using either public transportation or another mode. We also focus on affordability and using micro estimates of wealth to look at how wealth and city services are delivered in the city. We then look at also citizen experience, for example, and looking at what is the active transportation per square kilometer, the performance of cycling and pedestrian. These are other indicators that we utilize. Again, and I think that was something that I want to stress is that, these indicators and this work is a product of having the right fundamentals. It's a product of having the right sharing protocols, of sharing it in the right way, and doing the precursory work of saying, what are my outcomes? What do I want to track? And what data do I need to track and plan for those outcomes? And then finally, just another example on road safety, looking at the length of drivable roads and then kind of crossing that with incidents of accidents. So maybe just to close a couple of things. So what are the constraints of this data-led development? The first one is, and I think that was something that we found is, it's the lack of appropriate data governance frameworks and sharing protocols that really facilitate the sharing between agencies and to a more open public. The second one is, and this is a problem that happens everywhere in the world, is we need more people, right? At the end of the day, it's not enough to put your data once and do, a big effort once that puts the data available in a platform. This has to be done in a continuous way that makes sure always, what is the data that is available? How can I improve the data that is available? How can I make it more up to date? And this takes capacity and takes time. Third, it's something that this is why also we focus a lot on fundamental data sets, which is really doing that work of what are my outcomes, and finally, what are these key data sets that I need to share that need to be correct, and how do I share them? And finally, having an actual platform that integrates and shares this data for efficiency, in terms of collaboration, in terms of it being user-friendly, and enable to share that data more widely. Maybe finally what I'd say, and with this I'll share, which is, I mean, the data revolution is exciting enough, you know. The possibilities of what you can do with data today in terms of planning, in terms of operations, is exciting enough. But it's even more exciting once you start thinking about where transportation is going. And if you start thinking of mobility as a service, which is, you know, these platforms that are able to aggregate, pay, validate the flows of data, you know, one platform that is able to put together all data modes together, the fundamental for having mass platforms that connect to your public transportation system is open data. It's about having high quality data and availability, data standardized in ways that mass platforms can use them, having interoperability of your systems by design, and making sure that, you know, the data governance in terms of security and privacy are established well in advance. So I think partly why we are so interested in not only using data for today is because we really see utilizing data as a fundamental for how the public the transportation system and the mobility systems in cities will be delivered tomorrow. And those fundamentals have to be set today. So with that, I'll close and hand it back to our moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you very much for putting across this presentation. I think you've talked about the need of standardization very precisely. And I think going forward, since more and more ICT related solutions are coming into picture in urban mobility, we'll need standardizations in terms of how we're collecting different types of data sets. I think this is something that we are also going to be working towards. On that note, I'll move to my next speaker. But before that, we have a small poll for you again for our participants. So I'll request Nausheen if you can just reflect on the poll. Yeah, again, so I mean, Rikesh already touched upon that the need for making available the data sets. So we are asking you that why do you think that, you know, mobility related data should be openly available? What are the benefits? So you have 4 options, whether you know, it helps bringing transparency and improves the efficiency of the system, whether you think that it facilitates innovation and economic benefits as well. So please put in your responses, and then we will move towards our next and final speaker. Yeah, so as you can see that facilitating innovations is something that's coming out to be a clear winner here, and of course putting data in open and, you know, inviting other players in the ecosystem to kind of feed on this data and make solutions. It's something that is very important, and equally important is bringing transparency in the system and improving efficiency in the system. Interesting. Let's move to our next speaker. Let me invite Mr. Pravesh Biani. Pravesh and his team has been kind of behind the Delhi's open data portal. Delhi, I think back in 2018, became the first city to kind of put their static and real-time data sets in on a public open portal. Pravesh is a associate professor at IIIT Delhi, and he has bachelor's in engineering from IIT Bombay. He also has a MS from McMaster University in Canada. He holds a PhD degree from IIT Delhi, and he was also a postdoctoral researcher at University of Minnesota. His research interests are physical layer wireless and wireline communications, optimization of signal processing, and machine learning. And recently, he has been kind of involved in solving problems of urban transportation, especially bus route network design. So on that note, let me invite Pravesh to this panel. Pravesh, over to you, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, Pravesh, it's visible. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, I think almost everything has been said that should have been said. So what I will say now is my specific experience in India, and I'll just take from where Rikesh left and where Tatiana, you can see me, right? You can see my screen and the presentation as well. Okay.
We can't see the presentation.
No,
you can't see
it's visible now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just trying to, okay, great. So I'll just, start and with just two or three items that, probably I'll go deeper into it, that what are the main roadblocks about opening the data and why is it still not happening in India? So we understand very well the uses, and I think Nikesh and Tati both probably covered almost every angle to it, and in fact more to it. In fact, I'll copy their slides tomorrow and then put in my slides. So it was so well done. And Mr. Kunal Kumar talked about the need to build not just systems but actually everything for people, which is exactly what needs to be done. I will talk about why these things are still not happening. I mean, if open data is such an easy thing to understand and such an important thing to realize in the mobility world, then why is it still not happening? That's the question I would like to answer based on my experiences in Delhi and at least maybe 12 to 15 cities in India. And I'll just come to just one line, and that one line, or actually just two words rather. The first word is capacity, and the second word is I would, for the lack of good word, I'll just call it gatekeeping. So I think these are the two reasons why open data is not happening in India, and I'll come to their nuances and their details. But I'll just talk about what the last question that GIZ team shared, and I think all those four things, right? Transparency, innovations, and economic benefits, they are not exclusive to each other. They all feed on each other. So if you have more transparency, you have better governance. When you have better governance, you have more efficiency. When you have more efficiency, you have better service. When you have better service, you have more riders. When you have more riders, then you have economic benefits. Also, when you have more innovations, you have more economic benefits. So I think all those four items are linked to each other. So I'd say all of them get 25% according to me, and all of them are reasons that that should be there. But most importantly, as Mr. Kunal Kumar said, that when public data is shared, most importantly, public benefits. And in India's case, it's more so because India is a extremely road and car and basically car-centric country, especially the urban cities, and public transit is almost not there. When I say almost not there, I mean the investment in that is almost not there, minus some metros, of course. And when we have open data system for public transit, the public that benefits is basically the poor people, the women, and those who can't drive, those who don't own single occupancy vehicles. So open data for India actually is even more important, because when poor folks benefit, economy even gets better. When there is a better public transit, you actually have women empowerment. So open data is extremely important in India's case, more so than any other place. I'll talk about what are the main hurdles in the data sharing. And one of the, these are 5 or 6 main hurdles that I've seen based on my visit to around 15 cities in India. And the biggest hurdle really is, I'll come to the main 4 hurdles, but let me start with, one at a time, is lack of collection of data. And fortunately now what is happening is that only around 20% of cities in India, cities like Raipur, where I'm from right now, and where I'm actually sitting right now, talking to the transit authority here, they actually have not even collected any data. So everything is pretty much manual. That's around 20% of cities. But more importantly, the biggest hurdle in data sharing, in opening the data, which I'll call data sharing right now, is basically that the 2 words that I mentioned. One is gatekeeping, another is lack of capacity. I see that we still don't understand the government agencies, the officials, mainly the bureaucrats, the civil servants, who actually are not at all an expert in transport systems, or they don't understand transportation, they understand administration. For them, if you ask any administrator, sharing anything is the last thing he'll do. Okay, that's the most important reason. The reason why he won't do it is because he does not understand the benefits from it. He does not understand the benefits from it because he is not a transportation expert. So basically, the capacity problem is not just there in building systems, but also really is in every level, from the top to the bottom. I mean, we have Mr. Kunal Kumar, who is an exceptional IS officer, and he's really the rarest of rare who actually understands this from the bottom. But most officers are not like that. They believe that opening the data implies putting themselves to a scrutiny. More importantly, the socialist framework that we have, they actually fear that other companies will make money from it. So when I go to them and I said, look, sir, why don't you share this data? Google Maps will have it, Map My India will have it. They say, hey, they'll make money, so why should I give them money? So this is the sort of tendency that we are in. Secondly is understanding, linked point is capacity point. And I'll actually good point to put GIZ also on the block here. I saw this tender just a few days back, and in the tender actually right now there's still not invocation to folks who actually understand data, computer scientists, mathematicians. They still are talking about transportation planners. So we still have not internalized in our blood the fact that transportation now is about data, is about planning, is about IT, is about computer science. And the speaker from NIC actually said it very well about the need for ML and AI. And none of the agencies in the world, including TfL, Uber, they all have technologists who are from this background in their team. However, in India, we're still, looking at transportation planners as the main stakeholder in the system. The fact is that it's actually the computer scientists and mathematicians. So the idea is that we still don't have understanding, the in-depth understanding of really what it requires to open the data, why is it useful, and this is the basic problem. So it's an education problem in India. It's a problem of understanding the fundamentals. It's not the technology problem. It's not governance or legal problem as such. It's most importantly to do with making sure that people understand why is it useful, and who are the right stakeholders who will make this work. Finally, one important point I would like to make is that even when these things actually happen, there are actually many data sharks present in India right now, and that is because of the contractual mechanisms that we have in data sharing. So Tati knows about this. We have worked in Chennai together, but I'll talk about at least 10 to 15 cities. Bhopal, Indore, Chennai are just examples. There are smaller cities, Patna, Lucknow, Allahabad, many other cities where actually the contracts have been signed in a way that data sharing is not even possible. So just to give an analogy, it's like I go to a medical shop and I buy a medicine, but I can't take it because the contract says that you can only buy medicine. So systems are in place, data is there, but data sharing is not allowed by contract. Some of it is actually a bad faith thing. For example, in these three cities, there's a company called Chalo who operates. They want to monopolize the data. So there are monopoly data sharks that are present. There are operations, issues where data is not even collected. There are issues where you have to actually literally beg the officers to open the data. So I think the problem is very deep in India. We have not even reached a level where we'll say, hey, Luke, use ML and AI. We are really at the lowest pyramid, in the Maslow's pyramid. We are at the lowest block. However, it has happened in Delhi, and that is a case study I'll just take a few minutes on. And the reason why it happened in Delhi is because the minister and the officers at the top actually accepted that this is a great idea to do, and they actually made sure that they did it. And of course, our team executed it. But it's because of their, I would say, their, coming in the way of opening. I mean, they basically facilitated it. Until that happens, everything is just almost impossible. So thanks to the Delhi government, we opened the data. Our data is around right now for 4,000 buses, but it will expand to 7,000 buses in next couple of weeks, hopefully a month maybe. And right now it has 200 users. It includes Google, Movit, and all the big map players. It includes Harvard University. It includes all IITs, Australia, Singapore. A lot of research labs have published papers in our open data that we have done in Delhi, and it's actually working beautifully in the last 3 years. There has been no problems. And Delhi is a very complicated place because it has multiple agencies. It has 15,000 staffs, conductors, 7,000 buses, almost 70% of what probably TFL is, and various type of buses, many routes spanning multiple states, UP, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Delhi itself. So there are 3 states that buses move in, different fare logic, etc., etc. So all that has been taken care of in our open data system. And not just that, just to brag a little bit about our work, we have also built our own app. By the way, this is not the only app. There may be at least 10 or 15 more apps like TFL. But our app has also made sure that we have used this open data to create this open ticketing system. Just like you have a airline ticketing, now we have an API-based bus ticketing, which can be implemented right away in any place. And of course in Delhi. And we have sold more than 15 million tickets in the last 7-8 months, including in the COVID situation. And we have more than 100,000 people who use our system every day. So that is that is my final submission. Finally, I'll just talk about this systematic and institutional mechanism for data. Basically, the point that Tati was making, and that's a very important point. And I think IODX is one very good example of making the data sharing in an institutional fashion. But we have some more work that we have done on that side. One answer is what we call as data trust, which is basically sort of an entity, sort of a legal governing body, non-profit entity, which basically acts as a steward of data, just like an exchange, but in a very focused for mobility data. IODX is way wider and very complicated. This is very simple and can be rolled out very quickly, which basically acts as a marketplace of data where you can simply put your data and ask the agency if a user comes, whether the user is allowed to take the data or not. A very simple sort of admission control mechanism there. And it can also be a commercial data, so commercial entities can also put in their data, and the data sharing can become very institutionalized and with right legal and governance framework. So we are now piloting this data trust in Delhi. So our open data will go to this data trust in a couple of weeks when the whole system works. So that is one answer that Tatiana was talking about. But finally, I would just like to say that open data usefulness is beyond doubt. It's established very well. TFL has been the leader in showing what you can do with that. The only thing we need is have a more deeper dialogue where we actually get into troubling questions that we don't really ask the representatives, especially the IS officers. We should be telling them that, look, you are coming in the way, okay? And till right contracts are signed and folks actually get, the folks at the top actually are convinced that we should open data. There is enough technical capacity outside these institutions, team like my team or many other teams actually, who can easily make things work for years to come. So talking about issues that are not politically correct is the answer to opening data in India. Is my final one line that you should take away from my talk is that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pravesh, for the lovely insights. I think you provoked a lot of questions that needed to be asked here. And I think you rightly mentioned that we are still kind of following the old school methods of, especially when it comes to transport planning, and, data science needs to play a major role. And I also see the same thing. Data science will play a major role in coming years when it comes to planning transportation systems. So we are kind of moving towards last few minutes of our webinar. I do have few questions from our participants, which probably I'll put across. And let me just start with so Rikesh, you've been involved in this domain for quite some time now, and when we talk about open data, I mean, identifying the right sets of data sets is all very important. I mean, when we are talking about a transit agency like TFL or like many others in India. So how do you define the kind of data sets that you would want to put it in an open domain? And I'm sure that there are type of data sets which you would say that this is something that I do not want to kind of put it in a public domain. So do you already have some kind of a guideline where you say that, these are the data sets that we are opening, and these are the data sets that we should not be kind of opening and withholding? So if you can kind of lightly touch upon that.
Yeah, sure, Narendra. So I think, yeah, firstly, you do have to have a framework or some principles as to where you release data and where you don't release data. And I think clearly the line is, if there's a reputational or a legal risk, you're better off not releasing that data. So anyone's personal data is a no-go area. So I think there's some principles, but the other thing I would say is it comes back to the earlier point that if you're a mayor, what's in your manifesto? What are you looking to achieve in the next 5-6 years? And similarly, if you're a citizen and a customer, what pain points do you feel aligned to that manifesto? And I think it's really important for the officers or the city municipality team to really dig into that. And I'll give you one really example. It's not about cost, it's not about scale, but in London recently, we're having a conversation about where the toilets are. And that's quite simple static data. But by releasing that data, what you're doing is solving a significant pain point. People might have accessibility needs, people may need to use the toilet more regularly, etc., etc. So really try and understand the pain point and start small. You don't need to have real-time dynamic data that's hosted on cloud and you're shifting lots of data back and forth. It could be just some static geo-coordinate data, geolocation data you release. But develop a product roadmap on your data that you're releasing, and don't try and overcomplicate it, would be my advice. I think you might be on mute, Narendra.
Yeah, sorry. So there's one more question to you, Rikesh, what is the agreement with companies like Waze to share the data that TFL is currently doing? If you can answer that as well.
So the first point is we do not give any exclusivity to Waze, Apple, or Google. We release the data to them that we'll release to anyone else. We may, as part of the development, work with them locally, but ultimately when we release the data, what Waze are getting is what you could get through our portal. So that level playing field is critical. Otherwise, you create a two-tiered system.
Thanks, Rikesh. Pravesh, if you are there, probably one question to you, because since you are very closely working with DTC, there is a question that why DMRC has not made their data open yet. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so DMRC's data is open, not in our format, but it is actually open. And see, the buses have a, when you want to open the data, you want to understand what is the, where is the need really. In case of buses, the data is extremely dynamic because traffic changes and there are literally thousands of routes. In the case of metro, subway, right, there are just 5 or 6 routes and they operate on time. So the timetable that is available in the site is actually in open data. I mean, it's not in the format that one loves, but it's really in open data. So I would say they already have open data. We have not opened it in the GTFS format because it's already there. But buses, makes more sense to open them.
And since we are talking about converting data sets into, for example, you said GTFS. So, and since your team has been closely working with these cities, maybe I can put out this question. Do you think how much time or effort does it take to kind of, say a city like Raipur, since you're in Raipur, to kind of gather this data and, standardize it and open it, put it on an open platform? And if you can also touch upon the cost implication to the city.
So it's really, I think that's a great question, and I should have covered that. In the early days, because we were learning, the cost was a little bit higher because we had to pay for the learning too. We had to pay our dues. But now the cost is really less because everything is open sourced. We have made our code open also. So I would say for a city like Delhi, which has 3,000 buses, the cost would be, sub $10,000 from end to end. That would be the cost, including the server cost. Yeah. In fact, just to give you this perspective, a lot of people have this confusion that we'll need a huge server. I'm sure Rikesh can throw some more light. But literally our open data, which is used by 200 people live right now, 3,400 buses, is actually run on a PC machine, which is just 2 gigahertz CPU. Not even multi-core. So that is the power of GTFS and the format that we use. It's pretty light.
Thanks, Rikesh. I mean, I do not have any questions from participants per se, but probably I would like to go to you and Rikesh for one last piece of advice or recommendation, if I can put it out, that you would like to concluding as a concluding remarks from your side. So let me start with Rikesh and then Pravesh for Indian cities. Yeah.
So I regularly visit India, and Delhi, Ahmedabad, and Vadodara is my hometown. In fact, my father-in-law is in Vadodara. So what I'd like to see is next time I'm in India, is I take my mobile phone as soon as I get off the plane, and it tells me what bus I should be taking from the airport straight to the train station, and then it tells me where on the train station where I can have a coffee. And then I get on my train, I arrive at Vadodara station in my rickshaw, straight to my father-in-law's house. That's what I'd like to do in 2 years' time.
Great, Rikesh. Thank you. Pravesh?
Rikesh, you should directly go to your father-in-law's house and not wait for the coffee. So, yeah, I think fair point, Rikesh. I think, I would say, and World Bank is here, and there are I saw Mr. Swami here, Dr. Sinha is here. I think, as a group, all we need to tell these guys is that, look, what, open up and let us know what you require from our side, and we'll do whatever it takes. But opening up and is the first thing they should agree with, and this should be a group activity. Just to give you one thing, in many offices now, whenever they see me, they say, oh, he has now again come to tell the same thing, that we should open the data. We'll talk about it later. But if we go as a group, I think the effect will be manifolds, especially when it comes from TFL and World Bank and very renowned people like Mr. Swami and CPT, etc. So I don't think technology is an issue anymore. I think just the willingness is an issue, and we should make them willing by going there together. Rikesh's dream will come true then.
And just one point, I fully agree, Pravesh. And this fear of failure, we've got to remove it. We've got to experiment, start small, and very quickly you'll create evidence to scale. And we've got to get that right culture. I fully agree. This is a people problem. It's not a technology issue. Sometimes the technologists confuse it and turn it into a more complicated issue than it should be. But ultimately, we want to make lives of our citizens better, and let's give them the right information that enables that.
100%.
Thank you, Rikesh. Tatiana had to leave, actually. I think she had some prior commitments, so she's not here for concluding remarks. Maybe to summarize, Shalini is here. I can request Shalini to kind of give a concluding remarks and vote of thanks to the panelists. And Rikesh, I hope next time you are in India, you'll have that application where you can, go from point A to B. Shalini, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Narendra. I think very, very, very interesting set of presentations that we heard from all of them. As this is ending, I will first like to thank all the panelists for the time and then for their interesting presentations. So we had Mr. Kunal Kumar, who talked about Government of India's initiatives in promoting data-driven mobility solutions, and the different initiatives of National Urban Digital Mission, Data Smart City Strategy, and he also talked about the culture of data. So, and then we had Dr. Neeta Verma, who essentially talked about the current need for data management and data-driven technologies, and how important it is to establish open data ecosystem across different sectors. And she also mentioned about the NIC's initiative about open data, open government data platform, which is there. Mr. Rakesh, thank you for sharing how TFL approached developing open data ecosystem through infrastructure and policies. And you have also very well highlighted that it is not just the user benefits, but also the economic benefits that can be achieved through it and innovations that it will bring along. And you also talked about engaging with the open data community through blogs, events, or hackathons. And with the larger objective, I mean, the objective is not just data sharing, but it's the larger objective of how do we make the cities better and how do we, meet customer requirements. Tatiana highlighted the need for identification of fundamental data sets and also identified certain constraints. And also talked about how disruptive this change is going to be due to technology, and also presented some of the analysis that has been done in Chennai based on the open data sets. Professor Pravesh talked about how Delhi has successfully developed the open transit data platform, and this I think would surely help other cities also take similar initiatives and also continue towards development of an open data ecosystem and be a little more open about sharing of the data, which they are kind of not very, they're being very conservative about at the moment. Two important aspects that emerged are firstly that defining the strategic outcomes that are being targeted, because that is what will make the open data far more meaningful. And data not really as an infrastructure, but as a culture of data in which we have to look at capacities, we have to look at the processes, we will have to look at the platforms and the governance. So very, very interesting. Thanks to all the distinguished panelists for sharing their experiences and useful insights. I think the dialogue has just started and this will go beyond this Mobilogue. Thanks Narendra for moderating this session. Thanks to all the participants. Hope they found this session really useful. We would also like to acknowledge the support of MAHUA in all our activities. And lastly, thanks to the CEPT and the GIZ team for all your effort in making this event a success. Thank you.
Shalini, before we go, there's one very interesting question. Probably I'll just like to put out, and it's a very good thought as well.
Sure.
Somebody has asked that our location-based data sets from cell phone companies are currently accessible through proper channels for research purposes. So Rikesh, whether back at TFL, you guys are exploring something like this, and then probably Pravesh can also kind of put in some things that in India, if anybody's doing.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We have in the past purchased some data from telcos. We've also, as part of the COVID recovery, worked with telcos to get some data. I think all I will say on this is I think there's a challenge here that sometimes the commercial entities want TFL to buy the data, but they're happily using our data when we listen in it. So how do we get to a position where you can jointly partner and openly share data for social good? So at the moment, it feels a one-way relationship. I like it to be two-way.
Pravesh?
So my answer is that I have not seen a single project that has done it in a scale. So yes, a couple of them who take maybe one operator in a very small area, but not in a manner that has resulted in an outcome which is demonstrable. So it's not impossible. I think, as Rikesh pointed out, there has to be a business case for the telcos to share their data. It's as simple as that for them.
I think that's about it. Thank you. I mean, on this note, probably we can close this webinar. Shalini?
Yes, Narendra. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rikesh, Pravesh, Tatiana,
Thanks, everyone.
everybody, and thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good night. Bye.